testifies in opposition to the emergency certified bill before us. I'll just go over the same ground we kind of covered briefly during the previous discussion about the point of order raised by the Senate Republican Minority Leader, which is the description of this bill as an emergency. This bill, as I mentioned, contains 4 parts. The first piece is putting into statute guidance that has already come down from the State Department of Education on how school districts, public school districts, are to deal with federal immigration authorities if they end up on their front door. I would make the immediate point with regard to that nothing has changed. Federal immigration law is unchanged for many, many years. I do realize we have a new administration and there are some increased levels of enforcement, but I would expect that this policy should have pre-existed this moment in time. The second part of this bill has to do with drones, creating some regulations about the purchase of drones from foreign countries and the use of those drones more generally. I would point out that this bill did not receive a public hearing, and that when we vote on it today, many, many people's voices will be ignored in that act. And that's unfortunate because more information is coming out moment by moment. I had mentioned just a moment ago that my Southington, one of my towns that I represent, they have a very extensive drone program in their police department, and I'm afraid that they may have concerns with this bill, and I just won't know what they are. Representative Wood in the House last night, she brought up a similar issue with the towns that she represents and went so far as to vote against the rest of the majority as a result. So that's an indicator that this is an important issue by itself. The third thing that's in this bill is effectively it's Christmas for various entities that are aligned with the Democratic majority. And I, at some point today, plan to discuss that in much greater detail. But let's just say Planned Parenthood is the largest recipient in the list, and this is an organization that has billions of dollars in assets and certainly are not in need of taxpayer funds. There's no emergency there. And then finally, there's the piece regarding the student athletes and their compensation, which, I certainly respect Senator Slapp and his comments, but I don't know that most of my constituents consider UConn beginning their recruiting season to be something that they would classify as an emergency for state government. And again, this is a bill that is already going through the legitimate legislative process. I believe it's had a hearing, and it's in the committee process right now. That should simply play out. Before we start calling things emergencies so that they can go around the legitimate process and be used to make a political statement, I think we should reconsider. I think we should think twice about how our legislative body is being used. I'm tempted to get into a lot of conversation about process, but we're here to discuss the merits of the policy before us. But I think that bringing up the fact that these are not actually emergency items is a key ingredient in this debate, and that's why I wanted to start with that. I'm going to get up a few times today to offer several amendments, but I'm going to start today just by making a couple of statements and then speaking about the first section of the bill having to do with the State Department of Education guidance with regard to federal immigration authorities. This bill, to me, is symbolic of the majority party shaking their fist at the President of the United States. But I don't see how that benefits my constituents. And I also don't see how that benefits anyone in the room's constituents. The fact of the matter is the federal government has a lot to say with how the federal government is run, and that includes the funding of states and the various entities within those states. It seems to me that if you want to protect your constituents and the organizations that you hold dear, you might want to start negotiating in good faith and on good terms with the federal government and not shaking your fist in the air in defiance. This policy that is before us today, at least the first and third sections of the bill, prioritize partisan ideology over the real issues that are affecting people in Connecticut. The people in Connecticut would definitely say there are emergencies. Their electric bill is an emergency. The cost of everything in this state is an emergency. The rising crime wave in this state is an emergency. Those things are what we should be discussing when we have an emergency certified bill in the legislature. And yet, there are precious few bills even going through the legitimate process on those subjects. People are struggling, and here we're going to talk about these 4 random and, in the cases of sections 1 and 3, clearly political issues. So let's get to it. Let's talk about the first portion. Senator Winfield brought out the first portion of the bill, sections 1 through 4, and I think he is in more or less agreement with me. I'll let him respond about whether or not this is codifying the direction that we're getting from the State Department of Education. I do want to take exception to something he said, though, which is that, quote unquote, schools are no longer safe spaces as they were. So through you, Madam President, I'd just like to ask the good chairman of the Judiciary Committee what he means by that, through you.
Thank you, Senator Winfield.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. There are norms that many of us have known and operated under, and currently many of those norms, whatever the law itself says, those norms seem to be being violated, and there's a lot of confusion around the way that things are now, whatever the new normal is, things are now going to work. There's been conversation about whether or not schools are places that we operate in the same way that we would operate in other places. Similarly, there's a conversation around churches and other spaces that we've considered safe. In direct answer to the question that was also posed, yes, we are codifying the directive that SD and the governor put forward.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate that answer. So just as a follow-up, as I pointed out, nothing has changed as far as federal immigration law is concerned. Yes, the current president has decided that he is going to put a focus on the enforcement of that federal immigration law, but nothing has actually changed in statute. So am I to understand that we have not had in our current set of policies, whether they are created statutorily or by guidance through State Department of Education or even locally by local boards of education, we have not had a policy set up for what happens when a federal immigration official shows up at a school? Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Winfield.
Madam President, through you, it is my understanding that there is no policy such as this in place. Again, there are norms that we have all operated under, and under those norms, there was not a need for this. I heard the good senator say that he expects that there should be, but in reality, our job is not just to react to what should be, it's to react to what is. And what is suggests that there is space for the legislation that's before us. The situation we find ourselves in is the very definition, at least as it relates to the parts I'm talking about, of an emergency. It is a very serious situation. I don't know about the senator's district, but I know that folks in my district and other districts, given that the role I've played in immigration policy in the state, have contacted me about their lack of clarity as to what it is they should be doing should they interact with immigration. It is unexpected, given that we had norms that seem to no longer be norms. This is completely unexpected. It is unexpected that folks in certain contexts would be the ones interacting with immigration. And because of all of that, it could potentially be dangerous, which is literally, as you read the definition of an emergency, the definition of an emergency through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate that answer, although I couldn't disagree more distinctly. The very discussion we're having is about police. In this case, maybe they're federal police, and they're there for a specific purpose. But nonetheless, These are sworn law enforcement officials whose duty is to protect people. And we're making this suggestion with this bill and also with the rhetoric associated with this debate that somehow children are not safe because of federal police or law enforcement officials. I reached out to, well, I didn't specifically, a colleague of mine reached out to the Wolcott Police Department and asked for their policy and protocol for what happens when a regular local police officer has got to go to the public school because there's a student that has been involved in something or maybe a witness to something. And they were able to obtain for me within a few hours the actual police reporting policy that is in written form. And I'm just curious. I mean, I don't see why the policy that is drafted wouldn't be exactly the same with regard to federal immigration officials. Can the good chairman let me know what his reaction to that is and why we would need a separate and distinct policy from what already exists local police? Through you, Madam President.
Senator Winfield.
I would ask to reframe that question because I'm not sure I follow what the question itself actually is.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm sorry, I get wordy sometimes, as we know. I'm asking why we would need a distinct and separate policy for dealing with federal police when they come to a school versus local police, because that policy already does exist. Through you.
Senator Winfield.
Madam President, I guess they are not the same. You can call lots of folks police. That doesn't mean that they do the same thing. They have different level of power. They have different things that they are trying to execute. And we have a policy before us that deals with what the federal immigration authorities would be attempting to execute as they went to a school. This piece of legislation before us talks about the way in which they show up and the way in which we should respond to them based on whether or not they have a judicial or administrative warrant, and I think it's wholly appropriate. I'm not sure that the senator would agree with me, but that's okay. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the answer. Certainly, I mean, we're allowed to have differences of opinion, and I respect the chairman immensely, but I do disagree. I don't know how the facts are really different. If you have a law enforcement official that shows up at a school, clearly we've been operating with the current federal immigration law for many, many years, and our local police have been interacting with schools for years as well. They already know what to do in this case. This is before us today as a so-called emergency just because we're trying to hype up the fact that Trump is supposedly trying to break down the doors of schools and churches to grab children. Through you, Madam President, can you, Mr. Chairman, cite for me a single example of a minor child being taken out of a school in the state of Connecticut via the president and ICE? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Winfield.
Thank you, Madam President. That's a wonderful question. No, the answer is no, I cannot. But here's the additional part of that. I don't think that we should wait for that to happen. We have a responsibility to the folks in this state, including our children. And it's not just about whether it's dangerous in the way that we generally conceive of danger. We generally talk about physical harm, that kind of thing. But you know what else is dangerous? It's dangerous to watch the potential case of what we are discussing right here, of one of these children being removed, and the trauma that would be inflicted upon our children. That is actual danger. And so we are forward-looking. And if the good senator is correct about what I assume he's suggesting that would not be happening, then there's no conversation to have, because this would not come into play. This is a forward-looking piece of legislation that I understand we have a disagreement on, but the way that it's constructed, I believe, is the way that the state should be moving forward. Through you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the comments by the good chairman, but again, the answer was no. This hasn't happened in the state of Connecticut, and to my knowledge, I don't think it's happened anywhere in the entire country. And let's remember that President Trump isn't new to being the president. He served 4 years as our president, and if I recall, his primary focus when he was elected the first time was illegal immigration. And yet, we're here We're going on 8 years later from that point to address something in a way that's already been addressed. The State Department of Education has already come up with this policy. We're putting it into statute for no real reason that I can surmise. It's already in effect. The existing policy having to do with local law enforcement suffices. If you read that policy, by the way, you discover that the policy is very clear about how the police effectively do treat the situation very delicately. They don't go barging in there and create a disruption. And I'm quite certain that that's the same circumstances that would occur if a minor happened to be witness to something related to federal immigration authorities or was part of an investigation. I don't believe that there's going to be chaos. I believe that is fear-mongering. I believe that is political. And I don't believe it has a place in the discussion of legitimate policy. And I also don't think that we should be doing it here as an emergency certified bill without an opportunity for the people of Connecticut to come and testify in a public hearing and discuss whether this is a good idea or a bad idea, or whether children are actually at risk, or whether or not school is not going to be a safe place any longer, etc. That's the purpose of the legislature. We are the people's representatives. The people decide our policy. The people should get the chance to come before us and state their concerns. And I'm sure there are people that will share the concerns of Senator Winfield. But I'm sure there are certain people that are going to be on the other side of that issue also. The problem is none of those people got their opportunity. Not on either side. So instead, you just got two guys here arguing about it instead of the whole state of Connecticut. And that's unfortunate. I've got dozens more questions about this section of the bill, but I'm actually going to skip over all that because I don't think it really much matters. I made my point, which is that this is in this bill for political purposes and not for the sense of policy. It is to enrage a portion of the population and to drive sentiment against the President of the United States, which I don't know who benefits from that. You know, I served under President Joe Biden, and I didn't much care for a lot of his policies, but I never raised the level of vitriol in my commentary to the fact that he's going to harm children without any evidence and without any examples. To me, it's over the top. What I would like to do today, since we're discussing this topic of illegal immigration, is address something that we can do that is a necessary requirement for the state of Connecticut. Back in 2019, a horrible mistake was made by this body when they passed a bill in 2019 to make changes to the Trust Act that predated it from 2013. Short history lesson. In 2013, the legislature voted unanimously to pass a law called the Connecticut Trust Act. And the Trust Act was designed to protect undocumented aliens in the state of Connecticut so that they would have less fear in interacting with law enforcement officials. In other words, if they wanted to report a crime or if they knew something was happening and they wanted to contact the police, we wanted to make sure that they could do that without fear of being turned over to immigration authorities. Now, I supported that bill back then, and I'm rethinking it today because I understand what that policy has turned into. It really hasn't benefited anyone. And the fact of the matter is, when the majority claims that they're helping illegal and undocumented immigrants, I question that with every fiber of my being, because they're not better off in this state. They have not received one iota of advancement in their station in life by being undocumented residents in the state of Connecticut. That doesn't help them at all. In fact, they get to live in Connecticut because of the generosity of the majority as second-class non-citizens. And that's ridiculous. I would much rather see us eliminate unlawful immigration to this country so that we can actually increase lawful immigration to this country. Not only is it disrespectful to people that are waiting in line in the process to come here lawfully, to encourage people to come here unlawfully through policies that have been passed on party lines in this state, including driver's licenses and in-state tuition benefits and a plethora of free money in the form of all types of state benefits, and most recently Husky for Immigrants. Not only is that wrong, because you are basically putting folks that came here unlawfully ahead of people that are trying to get here lawfully, but you're not benefiting them either, because at the end of the day, they do not have the same rights as citizens. I would much rather people are able to come here through a process that affords them the right to be Americans like everybody else, instead of being kept in check as a second-class group of people without the same rights in sanctuary locations across our state. To me, that's disgraceful. That is not a benefit. And I'm tired of having it thrown in my face that somehow, because I'm a Republican and a white man, that somehow I don't care about undocumented aliens in this state or this country. Nothing could be farther from the truth. I can tell you that if I came from South America or some other place where I didn't have the ability to live free and live safe, I would be trying to get here too. But I would also be trying to advocate for the United States government to come up with a mechanism to make sure that me and my family could come to a safe country instead of a country that condones letting in people that are criminals, drug dealers, traffickers in sex, in humans, in guns. And that's what's happened over the last 5 or 6 years, and that's what's terrible. And I'm so happy to see our president cracking down on that and suggesting that we should have a lawful system of immigration. We should have a secure border as a country. Not in Connecticut, though. In Connecticut, in 2019, this body on party lines passed a law effectively putting criminal aliens, and I'm not talking about people that simply broke the law by crossing the border. That's a separate issue. I'm talking about actual criminal aliens. Put those people above the law. In 2013, when the Trust Act was originally passed, it carved out certain groups of people. It said, well, we're going to protect these undocumented immigrants from ICE, but some people, really, we ought to turn them over. And that list of people includes those folks that have been convicted of a felony crime, folks that are subject to pending criminal charges, folks that have an outstanding arrest warrant in our state, people that are known gang members, people that are on the federal terrorist screening database, people that are already subject to an order of deportation, and also people that, according to a police officer, present an unacceptable risk to public safety. Those people who were originally not afforded the benefit of those protections under the Trust Act were granted protections by a bill here in this chamber in 2019. I was proud to stand up then and oppose it, and today I'm offering an amendment, and that amendment, Madam President, is LCO 5493, to restore those protections and to say we should not be protecting criminal aliens. Now, I might want to go a little bit further and say that we shouldn't have the Trust Act at all. But in a sense of trying to create some sort of reasonableness in a chamber where I stand in an extreme minority, I am appealing to the majority to say, look, draw the line somewhere else. If you want to have a Trust Act that protects people that are in the country unlawfully, okay, but do not include criminals and gang members and terrorists in that definition. We have a chance to right the wrong of 2019 right now. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. Madam President, I've given you the LCO. I ask that this amendment be called and that once it's voted on, it has a roll call vote.
We will have a roll call vote, Mr.